Hey everyone, Alex from Android Central here with a phone that needs absolutely no introduction. This is the Galaxy S3 from Samsung. It's one of the most anticipated phones of the year, so we're just going to dive right in because there's a lot to cover. So first things first, this is a 4.8 inch device and we've got this gigantic HD Super AMOLED display on the front here. 720p resolution, and with the brightness cranked up it looks really nice. Maybe not quite to the level of the HTC One X, but still incredibly good. Up top we've got the usual light sensors in addition to a 1.9 megapixel front-facing camera, and underneath the screen there's a standard set of 3 buttons that Samsung likes to put on all its international phones. So we've got a big clicky home button in the middle and capacitive menu and back keys on either side. And there's no multitasking button here, which means you'll be switching apps the old-fashioned way by long pressing this home key. So taking a look at the sides, we've got power on the right edge, volume rock on the left, micro USB down below, and the 3.5mm headphone jack up top. And we should mention that this is a surprisingly thin handset too, at 8.6mm. We've definitely seen thinner, but the S3 has really nice ergonomics with this very smooth rounded design. Around the back we've got an 8 megapixel main camera with LED flash and a rear speaker on there too. It's a glossy plastic finish which maybe won't be to everyone's tastes, but I think this white colour actually looks really nice. And although it is very glossy, it doesn't feel cheap or nasty in the hand. And Samsung actually has its own name for this glossy finished polycarbonate that it uses here. It's calling it Hyperglaze. So this area around the back snaps off, and behind it you've got a removable 2100 mAh battery with NFC support, and also spring-loaded microSD and micro SIM card slots. So we've got removable storage and a removable battery, which is definitely a plus for this phone. So powering on the S3, the first thing you'll see is this revamped lock screen, which ripples really nicely like a pool of water when you touch it. And all you do to unlock is swipe in any direction on the home screen. What you can also do is jump straight into an app of your choice by swiping upwards on one of these shortcut icons, and that's something which will be very familiar if you've used HTC Sense before. Anyway, we're in the new version of TouchWiz here, which is being dubbed the TouchWiz Nature UX. And if you've been following any of Samsung's promotional stuff for this phone, you'll know that the whole nature theme is featured in a pretty big way, and wallpapers and a lot of the sound effects are, as Samsung says, inspired by nature. And TouchWiz has been given a pretty comprehensive visual overhaul, but some things are still recognisable from previous versions. So open the notification area, we've got all of our settings shortcuts, and you can actually scroll through this now to see more options. If we pinch in and out of one of the home screens, we get this zoomed out overview. We can add up to 7 home screens at a time, just like previous versions of TouchWiz. The app drawer itself really hasn't changed that much from stock Android though. We've got a horizontal scrolling list of apps and a similar kind of setup for widgets. When it comes to apps and widgets, Samsung's actually trimmed down a lot of the fat in the Galaxy S3. So a lot has been consolidated down. You're no longer presented with this massive sea of colourful widgets of varying sizes. The whole thing really is a lot more restrained on the S3. Next, let's jump to the settings quickly and see exactly what we're dealing with on the software side. Unsurprisingly, Android 4.0.4 Ice Cream Sandwich latest version, and the top-notch hardware that we've got inside the Galaxy S3 really flies along with this combination of ICS and Samsung's own software enhancements. So we've got quad-core Exynos chip in here at 1.4 GHz, 1 gig of RAM, 16 gigs of storage, and of course that's upgradable via the microSD card slot in the back here. It's also worth mentioning that we've got the international version here, though we now know the US and Canadian versions will have slightly different specs. In any case, this is an extremely fast phone, and one of the places that's most apparent is in the browser, as you'll see when we fire up Android Central in the browser here. So we're on Wi-Fi, and naturally the site loads pretty quickly, but it renders it just as fast, and scrolling speeds are insanely smooth, as is pinching to zoom. Tab switching as well, very fast, and aside from that, it's your standard ICS browser. As you can see here, tabs are handled a little differently, and you can reach overview of tabs by pinching to zoom all the way out. One feature which comes in really handy, especially when reading or browsing, is Smart Stay. And if you haven't heard of this before, it means that instead of automatically dimming the screen after a certain time, the phone instead uses the front-facing camera to work out if you're still looking at it, and then acts accordingly. So you can see it here in the settings. Obviously it's not the kind of feature that makes for a particularly exciting video demo, but trust me, it is very useful. What's also new is AllShare Play. It's an expansion of Samsung's existing AllShare DLNA app. What this lets you do is stream content wirelessly between multiple Galaxy S3s, Samsung TVs, PCs or cloud storage, which here is actually provided by SugarSync. Obviously how well this service works for you is going to depend on how invested you are in Samsung's ecosystem, but regardless, it's an app that has a lot of potential and something that we're going to take a more detailed look at in a future video. Another interesting new software feature is Pop-Up Play, and we can take a look at that now in the Gallery app. So it's basically a picture-in-picture service that lets you view video in a smaller window while using your phone normally in the background. So to activate it, we just start playing a video and then select this button. Then we can press the home button and load in the app we want, for example the browser. So as you can see here, even when we're rendering a 1080p video in the background, the performance of the phone isn't really visibly affected. So we can still flip between apps, scroll around web pages, and there's really no noticeable slowdown here. So it's very impressive and definitely a testament to the hardware Samsung's packed into this thing. Another heavily promoted feature in the Galaxy S3 is S-Voice. And there's really no other way to describe this app. It is essentially a clone of the iPhone Siri service. So you can activate it with a double tap of the home key by saying a particular phrase on the lock screen, or by finding it in the app drawer. But once you're in, the app suffers from many of the same issues that Siri faces, namely that it's good for basic queries, but not so great at more complex tasks. So we'll try a few commands here to show this off. So first, let's try taking a look at the weather, and we can see what it says to us. What's the weather like in London? So it does a pretty good job. Let's try something a bit more complex. When's Easter next year? So it's taking its time, but it's definitely got what we said to it. And it's come up with the correct date, which is pretty impressive. Next up, something a bit more complicated still. What's $30 in euros? So once again, we're in for a pretty long wait while it considers its options.
I'm sorry, I don't have the answer.
So it's kind of fallen over in there a little bit, and that's a fairly common problem when you give it anything more than just a very simple command. Like Siri, it has its issues with accuracy, and that makes it more of a gimmick than a useful tool, but it definitely has potential, and we're keen to see how S-Voice evolves in the future. In terms of preloaded apps, we've got all the usual TouchWiz stuff, Samsung's music, video and game hubs, and we've also got Flipboard, and the S3 is the first phone to have this preloaded. So if you're not familiar with it on iOS, the idea is you have these big panels that you can use to flip between stories that interest you, social updates and all that stuff too. So if you tell the app which categories you're interested in, you can also plug in your Twitter details, Google Reader details and Facebook stuff, all the rest of that. And essentially what you get is a virtual magazine that's tailored to your interests and your accounts. So looks really nice on the S3 screen, very well designed, and definitely worth a look if you pick up one of these phones. Finally, let's take a look in the camera app, because the S3's camera is definitely one of its highlights. We've got an 8-megapixel BSI sensor on the back, and it does an excellent job of capturing clear images in just about all conditions. We've got a few different kinds of shooting modes here, so HDR, burst shots and a few others. And if we demo burst shots quickly, we'll see it lets us take multiple shots at once by long pressing the shutter button. And there's also an option to automatically pick the best focused image in the series, which is pretty cool. So very impressive camera on the S3, and we've got some sample shots and video up in our review. Anyway, that's about it for our hands-on overview of the Samsung Galaxy S3. We'll have a full review very soon and continuing coverage of the US versions as they approach release. Thanks for watching.